I want to just introduce myself to everybody. My name is Neil Collins, and I am a change agent with Latitude, Regenerative Real Estate. And we are a purpose-driven real estate collective and brand that works really across coast to coast, across the US and soon to be North America, really working in the vein of what does regeneration look like in the built environment. And the foundation of this is how can humans work in reciprocity with place. And so one of our big themes is how do we take a conventional property and how do we transform it on a regenerative path, so that it's not just trying to be lighter on the land, but how do we have a positive benefit as part of it. So with that, I just want to do a little bit of an announcement here. We have an incredible event coming up, and I'm going to share my screen. This is Latitude's new website, and if you can go to chooselatitude.com to kind of peruse it, we're really, really proud of it. But if you go to the journal at the top and scroll down to the inaugural Regenerative Real Estate Gathering at the Riverbend Farm, this is going to be a really amazing event that is coming up at the end of August 24th to the 27th. And Riverbend Farm is an incredible place that is one of the first designed properties to meet the Living Community Challenge standard. So this is Living Building Challenge, which is arguably the most rigorous and aspirational green building designation that exists in the world, but they do it on a larger scale. So we're talking about all the water that is used on site comes from rainwater harvesting. All the energy that is used, it is a net producer of energy on site. They're using local non-toxic materials. It's getting incorporated with biophilic design. There's an equity component to this. So it is more geared towards the real estate professional, be that realtors, designers, lenders, developers, architects. And what we're going to be gathering for is how do we really start to take this kind of work to make it more mainstream? What are the design charrettes that we need to have? What are some of the marketing tips and tricks that we need to do? What are the financing structures that we need to evolve? So I'm really excited about that event. And if you are interested, like I said, please go. You can register on Eventbrite, or we're hosting weekly info sessions about what this looks like. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to turn this over to Jesse. And again, Jesse is with BlueBarrel Rainwater Catchment Systems. And Jesse, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really excited about the work that you all are doing in this group. And I have a background in sustainable design and have spent lots of years sort of exploring aspects of site-based sustainable design and ultimately specialized in rainwater. It was not a direct path, but this is where I got to. So our website is bluebarrelsystems.com if anyone wants to look in parallel, but I'll be hosting a more face-to-face conversation today, and I'll show a few slides. It's a pretty niche topic, so I think after we get to know each other a little bit and why we're all here, I'm gonna pull us all together with some overview information and then open it back up to learn more about what you all are interested in. So just to get us started, I would like to know in what ways, does water come up in your work, or if not in your work, in your life? And if not that, what brought you here today? I'd like to hear from a few folks about that. If you want to raise the virtual hand and I can call on people.
And I'm sure we've got a ringer in the group here with Mark.
Oh, Mark has a hand up. So, and I can only see a few people's thumbnails. I assume if someone puts a hand up, you're going to pop to the top, but we'll see. Yeah, Mark, what brought you here today, or what does water do for you?
Well, in addition to being a change agent and wanting to sort of spread this knowledge to clients that I work with, I'm also an organic gardener, and I raise seedlings that I sell at the farmers market, and so I have interaction with a lot of gardeners, and so the more people I can get to, harvesting rainwater from their own landscape for their own landscape, when they want to put it there, the better. And so I should have rain barrels, but I don't. And so I'm really hungry for the information that you're going to share today.
Great. That helps a lot. Anybody else?
It looks like Alyssa's got her hand raised.
Okay, Alyssa.
Hi, everybody. So Jesse, thanks so much for being here. Neil and I bought a 5-acre property, and we're looking at putting a pond in and trying to retain more water on site in general. So I'm curious about rainwater harvesting. We live in the Pacific Northwest on Whidbey Island, and it's like we get so much rain throughout the winter. What does it look like in the summer? And so
This is the hazards of walking and talking. Alyssa, we're going to mute you, but we can come back to you if you find coverage soon.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I wasn't hearing the end of that. I got the part about, and I think we all got the part about the pond, which is a larger scale rainwater harvesting and understanding the seasons in your new home. So thank you. Izumi? And you'll need to unmute.
Thank you, Jesse. So Deborah and I live in the mountain. It's the southern tip of Los Padres National Forest in California. So this is as thirsty as it gets. Like, it's very, very dry. And the way that we get water is either by snowfall, and well, we do get rain, and we have, in the last several years, we will get in the summer like monsoon kind of rain, where it just dumps, right? And it just doesn't, it saturates the earth so quickly that it creates the flash floods. And so Deborah has kind of taken on this task of community-wide way to do, install rain barrels and create some kind of a gray water system. She's got a gray water system happening to irrigate her vegetable gardens in the back, which I'm really impressed by. So it's unlike where Neil and Alyssa is. Rain's very precious, so all the more I would love to have a barrel where we can, capture the rare opportunity when it rains. And when it rains, sometimes it's just like bucket turned over.
Yes. Okay. So I think in what you're describing is a real drought and deluge kind of environment. So I'm actually really glad between those of you that just offered, we have a show that we're in all different climates. And interestingly, when I started studying sustainable design, the first program I did was in Prescott, Arizona, which is a very high desert, arid environment, maybe somewhat like what you just described, Izumi. And that's where I learned all about rainwater harvesting. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Brad Lancaster's work. He's on a resource slide that I have for you all. But he's from that very dry environment, and that's the context where I learned about rainwater harvesting. So I thought of it as a drylands technique. Well, in the end, when I did my master's in sustainable design, I was in Massachusetts, and I thought, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to learn about what sustainable design means in a completely opposite type of climate. And what I was so amazed to learn is that actually the principles of rainwater harvesting were the same, because it is all about restoring an ecosystem, restoring the natural connections in the ecosystem. So I think with that, we can dive in, and
Well,
I'll do the, oh,
Jesse, let's take the last two. We had Vanessa and Chris, if that's okay.
oh, sure. Yeah, they
Okay.
weren't showing up on my screen, so I'm sorry. Thank you for popping in, Neil.
But yeah, friends don't let friends Zoom alone. This is
Yeah.
team sport these days.
Yes, wonderful. Hi, Vanessa. Can you unmute?
Hi, yeah. I'm also an organic gardener. I do a lot of permaculture stuff. Just super novice. We do have rain barrels. We're working on how to collect more in a more clean way, so that we're not getting so much sediment and runoff from the like leaves and things like that are getting trapped in the gutters. And keeping the water clean as you're storing it, and just like more efficient ways of using the rain barrel system. So we do have like a lot of the recycled 55-gallon barrels. We just did a stand-up system that has 3 barrels tall. And we have more barrels to use, but just wondering, like, is that system the most effective way to do it? Also, how do you pump it from the barrel area to like a garden area, so that we're not just hauling buckets and buckets of water everywhere?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And given the nature of today's presentation and the time limitations, you asked some really specific questions, which is wonderful. And I can tell you're already rainwater harvesting, because once you're already doing it, that's when you start getting up all the questions. So I'm just going to give you, in case we can't get into detail on some of those questions. Earlier this year, I did a presentation with the city of Los Angeles on rain barrel maintenance that talks about, it's an hour-and-a-half presentation on how to deal with some of the maintenance issues that, the sediment issues and things like that you just brought up. So in case we can't satisfy you today, know that that's there. In terms of how to pump, I actually have videos on exactly how to do that. So we probably won't have time to run those videos during this presentation, but in BlueBarrelSystems.com video gallery, you'll find those. So those resources are there for you. And we had one more. Let's take one more, and then I'm going to dive into slides.
Hi, thanks. Mine will be quick. I was just going to reiterate a very similar circumstance to what Alyssa was describing up in the Pacific Northwest. Relatively new 10-acre property, relatively new myself to a lot of these concepts, but no, we need to get a system set up. So it's just one more tick on that side of the spectrum for what we're trying to deal with and trying to learn where to start.
Okay, great. Well, let me dive into slides. Oops, I should probably share my screen before I hit play here. Okay, quick tech check. Do you all see what looks like an opening slide to a presentation? Okay, very good. And again, thanks for being here and thanks for having me. I think there are probably a million questions that could come up, and I want you to know that BlueBarrelSystems.com is a resource specifically for DIYers that's going to answer many of the specific questions that you have. But we're here to talk about ecosystem connections today, and really that's what got me into rainwater harvesting, and that's why I've specialized in it over time. It's all about the ecosystem. So some folks think of rainwater harvesting as this kind of new agey technique that sustainable designers have figured out and that we need to learn about. And the truth is, rainwater harvesting is what nature does and what communities have done in ancient times. So in recent history, we tend to have forgotten certain things that were known sort of ancestrally and by more indigenous communities. But the time has come for us to remember those and to restore those connections. So these are photos I just took walking around, and you'll see that different kinds of plants have different ways of capturing water, harvesting it, and delivering it back to their own root zones. And I'm always amazed when I see, that picture in the upper right is a little plant growing out of concrete. We've all seen that. So nature wants to regenerate. If we don't keep paving over it, we can help it do that. Here are the reasons, and there may be more, but these are kind of the reasons that have gelled in my 10 years specializing in rainwater harvesting for why people get interested in it. And I can tell you over the last decade, and especially in the last couple of years, I have felt a massive shift in what specifically is making people think about rainwater harvesting. So when I first started, I had to get really good at talking about how it would save you money or not. And to my heart's content, I was always in it for the steward the environment aspect. And it turns out that now people are really starting to key into that over and above how they might save money on their water bill. Nourishing plants. It's amazing that rainwater is actually a very healthy water source for your plants. So if no other reason, if you don't want to become an expert in why it's so good for the environment, you can experience a healthier garden irrigating with rainwater, which brings with it all the benefits of just more vegetation, healthier soils, more microbiology, more habitat, more critters. And then emergency preparedness is another one that's bringing a lot of people to rainwater harvesting. And it's really easy to set up a system where you're irrigating with it, but you also have stored water on site that you certainly need to be prepared to treat if you need to drink it. And there are potable systems. My company doesn't specialize in that. We're actually doing a recycled barrel solution. It's not legal to sell. People will use them for potable uses, but we don't market them for potable use. We market a irrigation solution. And increasing awareness and well-being. So what I've found is that when I started harvesting rainwater, it sort of automatically helps you tune into nature's cycles. So you're not just turning on a hose anymore that's going to give you pressurized water, whether it's hot and dry outside or not. You're really noticing when the barrels are full, when they're empty, and you're tuning into that and using it to become part of the ecosystem yourself, really. So I'll do a little bit on the environmental benefits of rainwater harvesting. I think everybody in this room knows that it is a benefit, but when it comes to trying to explain to somebody else why, I live in an arid climate as well, and I get a lot of folks saying, well, we don't have enough water to harvest. Why would you have a rain barrel in California or many rain barrels? Because they're going to be empty most of the year. Well, a lot of my work is around helping people think of it differently and realizing that rainwater harvesting is actually a very essential strategy in dry climates as well as wet ones. So in terms of the environmental benefits, rainwater harvesting will help you reduce your draw on stress systems. And, in more urban environments, that means a piped system, municipal system, and in more rural environments, it means the wells, and ultimately in any system, it means the water sources that we're drawing down, the deep aquifers, the rivers and the streams. Restoring the hydrologic cycle, that's a big one, and I have a dedicated slide on that. Reducing runoff. So again, we have people from all over the country here. Where I live, people are very drought focused. So people think of water conservation, but even in our dry climates, reducing runoff is, the biggest source of water pollution in the USA. It's one of the biggest environmental issues of our time. So no matter whether you live in a wet climate or a dry climate, the water conservation and the runoff reduction are two sides of the same coin that everybody benefits from. And then there's the energy water nexus. I don't know if anyone's heard, that's sort of a buzzword these days, but some folks aren't aware how much energy it takes to treat, pump, and heat water and deliver it through our developed systems. But in the state of California, pumping water alone accounts for 20% of per capita energy use. So the more water self-sufficient you become on site, especially using gravity-fed systems like rainwater catchment systems, you're reducing your carbon footprint at the same time. So here's a slide that may take you all the way back to 4th grade, but this really is where the rubber hits the road. So our water cycle is a closed loop. We actually have no less water on our planet than we ever did. It's all powered by the sun. Water evaporates from the ground, it condenses into clouds, it falls as precipitation, and then from there, some of it runs off into streams and back into the ocean. And then importantly, some of it infiltrates into the ground. So one big question that folks ask is, well, if this is a closed loop and all the water's still here, what's the problem? Why do we struggle so much with droughts? So the answer to that has something to do with what you're looking at here. So on the left, you see a natural landscape, and you can almost see that whole hydrologic system working right there in that microenvironment. So you can feel that spongy forest floor and those trees just breathing and helping that moisture get back into the air, the cloud formation on the mountains, the snowpack, and all of that water is just cycling through that system, and that's a healthy environment. And what you see on the right, if we had more time, I would ask one of you to narrate this slide for me, right? But I'm just going to keep buzzing through this. How much water is cycling in the picture on the right? Where's the water going? There's a channelized stream. I would venture a guess that maybe 0% of the water is actually infiltrating into the ground. So what we're looking at on the right is about the worst of what humans are capable of in our built environments. But what you're looking at is that the infiltration link in that global water cycle is completely capped off. So let's think a little more about what that does to our built environments and to the environment we live in. So this slide is some adapted statistics, and this is a graphic I've been using since I've been in grad school, and I've not stopped using it. What we're looking at on the left is what water does in a natural landscape. And I want to be clear, it doesn't really matter whether that natural landscape is a lush rainforest, a desert, or a chaparral, or anything in between. It's the percentages and the proportions of where that water is being sent. So about 40% evapotranspirates, that's represented by the arrow going straight up. So that includes just straight up evaporation off the ground, and then evapotranspiration means it's coming through plants and animals even. It's the processes that our living system uses to get that water back up into the sky. 25% each shallow and deep infiltration, represented by those arrows under the ground. So that's, a full 50% of the water that falls on the ground in nature makes its way back underneath the ground to hydrate soils and to recharge deep aquifers, and also to maintain the base levels in streams and rivers. And then the small arrow across the surface represents runoff. So 10% runoff is normal in any environment, but you see how very little water runs off. And you can imagine that. You can imagine that in a nice spongy forest floor or even the desert sand, you're not going to have water coursing, sheeting off the landscape like it does over a hardscape. So compare that to a developed landscape on the right, and we're assuming 75% impervious ground cover. And what that means is roofs, parking lots, roads, driveways, even lawns. Water doesn't penetrate lawns very well. They have very shallow root systems. Here we have only 30% evaporation. And then the kicker is 10% shallow infiltration, 5% deep infiltration, and a whopping 55% runoff, represented by that huge arrow. So what our developed environments have done is essentially flipped runoff and infiltration. So we are in what we have told Mother Nature with the way we've built our environments is get the water on out of here as quickly as possible, picking up pollutants along the way. And I think with more and more consciousness about this, we can learn to redevelop or rethink our environments to restore their ability to function as sponges, really, to keep the water, invite the water into our communities to stay. So just quickly, here's another representation of the hydrologic cycle. And here you see that home with a blue rainwater catchment system in it. And that's just representing the idea of that roof is being mitigated. Nothing's penetrating the roof. And us people sure do need a place to be. But now we have this household capturing that water that comes off the roof and allowing it, if used in the garden, that will be allowed to infiltrate again and restore the infiltration link in the global water cycle. So quickly, I'm going to change gears. Just some fun facts on the side of why plants love rainwater so much. It's 100% free of salts, chemicals, and minerals that are found in all other water sources. So obviously municipal water is treated, it's chlorinated, and if you're drawing from a well, it has some treatment in it as well, but it also has a lot of heavy metal, or sorry, minerals and sometimes metal load that those can build up in the garden, and soil doesn't always like that. So fresh from the sky, rainwater is 100% soft water. It collects a small amount of organic matter as it rolls off your roof, which is basically a light application of fertilizer. So this is A, why you can't drink straight out of a rain barrel, but B, why it's excellent water for your garden. It is slightly acidic, which is exactly what soil wants to be. Most organically grown plants want a soil pH between 5.5 and 6.5, which is exactly the pH of rainwater. And when I first started studying these things, I was like, what a coincidence. That's amazing. People should learn about rainwater harvesting. And over time, it dawns on you, this is not a coincidence. This is, the water we're meant to irrigate with. And just recently, I heard someone on YouTube, and I'm not going to be able to attribute this quote, but she was saying that her grandmother always said, nobody waters my garden better than God. So, I think this is probably exactly what she was talking about. And then rainwater contains nitrates, which is the bioavailable form of nitrogen, one of the very important macronutrients for plants. So don't be surprised if you start shifting your thinking towards letting rainwater be part of your garden and collecting it and letting your garden get more rainwater. You're going to start to just see more health restored in your landscape. So we don't have time to get into deep how-tos, and I'll just say again that at BlueBarrelSystems.com, it's actually an interactive environment where you can take yourself through a process of siting and sizing a system and then customizing it. But just briefly, if you're thinking about sizing a system, there's 3 considerations in order. So one is to size based on the size of your catchment surface is going to tell you how much water is available on your site. And spoiler alert, it's a lot. I don't care how little it rains, and I don't care how small your house is, you get a lot of water available for storage. So then after that, to get practical, you start to have to think about, well, how much am I using? And the truth is that answer may very well also be a lot. But many people have systems set up, most people are constrained in some way, either by the space they have available or their budget or both. And you can start with rainwater harvesting, dedicating the water to a specific part of the garden. You can, if you have a pressurized drip irrigation system, you may have zones. And I recommend people just go little at a time, turn off one zone and use rainwater for that zone. And then as you get comfortable with it, you can start replacing more and more zones with rainwater. But here we have just a couple examples of what some of BlueBarrel's customers have done. And I don't take credit for any of these other than supplying the parts and the materials and the know-how, because these people build their own. Everything we do is DIY. But on the left, we have someone in New Jersey who made great use of that space under his deck. And then on the right, this person in Texas has a cabana, and they actually had 10 barrels on their site, but they split them into groups of 2s and 3s to kind of dot around their landscape and service different parts. In terms of sizing, what's kind of cool is that it's really easy to measure your roof. Your roof plan doesn't matter. You're just measuring the flat footprint of area that the rooftop covers. And more specifically, if you're into a more detailed phase of planning out a system, if you've decided where you're going to put the system, look at the downspout that drains to that spot, figure out which part of the roof drains to that downspout, and you're measuring that section of the roof. So this graphic is just showing you that all these 3 very different roof plans have the same footprint. The one on the left is the simplest kind of example of, if you're only collecting from half that roof, you just split it in half to get your roof area. This is a tool that's very cool for some of you who are at a level of readiness where you want to start really looking at your property. So this is permadesign.com. And it's on my resource slide as well, but it lets you trace those green lines on that rooftop. Permadesign lets you trace the segments of your roof to get the footprint area for every section. So this is just showing you, I added the stars to demonstrate where downspouts might be. And I added those arrows, the white arrows, to show you the flow of water. But just as an exercise, if this person wanted to start collecting rainwater, They can see that kind of straight panel on the right side, the eastern panel, is about 1,000 square feet. So I'm going to use that for this example. Say that person wants to collect from that panel. We're not going to do the arithmetic. We don't have time, but this is what you need to remember. You know, you're just calculating a volume. It's just the amount of rain you get times the square footage of that section of roof. But what you can apply in any case is 0.6 gallons per square foot per inch of rain. Okay. And I'm going to go through this fast because I'm next going to show you a rainwater calculator. You don't even have to remember that much. Just use a rainwater calculator. Over 600 gallons per 1,000 square foot of rooftop per inch of rain. That's enough to fill 11 rain barrels with every single inch of rain. So for anyone in
Jesse, can I just say wow?
Oh, it's a
Wow.
lot, isn't it? So
That is amazing. That is an amazing statistic.
and I hope I want to give things that people could remember. So if you ever get to go to a cocktail party again in your life, you can tell people, like, did you know that you can fill 11 rain barrels with 1 inch of rain? So that's what you say to the Californian that says, we don't get enough rain to harvest. Okay. So here, BlueBarrelSystems.com has that rainwater calculator on it. You can, under our sizing tools, you can just put in that footprint area and you can use it forwards and backwards. So what I did here was I said, well, a 660 gallon system is a 12 barrel system. So how much rain would it take to fill that if I'm using just a 400 square foot patch of roof? And the answer is 2.75 inches. So you can see that I'm not just going to fill it once. I'm going to fill it maybe 5-6 times in that year, especially if I'm incorporating this into my irrigation plan. I have seasons worth of drawdown and recharge, where I'm really connecting with that water source. And sure, when June comes, maybe the clock starts on summer and maybe I run out by the end of the year, but maybe not. It just takes one kind of odd rain in the summertime to recharge that system again. So that's what we're looking at. And then for those of you, that's kind of a west of the Rockies phenomenon where we have this long, hot, dry summer. For those of you east of the Rockies, you have more regular rainfall pattern throughout the year, which means you're going to get more utility out of a smaller system. You may only need 2, 3, 4 barrels to sustain you because you're going to get such continual recharges. In an arid climate, the more Mediterranean climates, it is a storage game. If you want rainwater harvesting to be a significant part of your irrigation strategy, you just need a bigger system. But I never want that to intimidate people. Our design, for example, can be it's modular and it can be added onto very easily. So I'll tell people, start with a 2-barrel system if that's what you have space, budget, or motivation for. That's how you're going to get familiar with it. And then pretty quickly, you're going to say, all right, I need 4 more. Oh, I need 6 more. I need quite a few more to kind of tune this system to what's happening in my environment. But I learn by doing. So for those of you who also learn by doing, that's a good way to start, is small. So the siting principles are pretty basic, and we have a siting section on our website as well. But you need to be near and below a downspout. If you can't be near a downspout, there are workarounds. You can certainly pipe that water from farther away. But typically getting the water into the tank is almost always done by gravity. You've got a gutter system and a downspout system on your house already. If you don't, you're going to need one. But you do need that conduit system to get the water into storage. Ideally, you can be near and above your irrigation area as well. So this is sort of an ideal property where they've got this nice slope, and let's just imagine they have a beautiful garden downhill from that. Not all of us have that, but the good thing is with gravity-fed irrigation, you can actually service a flat site as well. What you can't do is get the water to go uphill by gravity. So people do use pumps or things like that if they actually need to get the water uphill. Storage should be shaded, ideally, and on level ground. So those are basic principles. And then now we're going to go straight into some kind of pretty pictures. I think I'll pause for a minute, just give myself a time check. I'm going to get into just examples to get you inspired from all over the United States. But before I do, does anyone want to stop me and interject just briefly and get us grounded again and where everybody's at?
This is Deborah, and I'm sorry I can't raise my hand on this setup. I wanted to just let you know this is a wonderful presentation. I've perused your website because Azumi already had sent me the link. You have made it so easy for someone to, if you will, catapult a community into action. I am just so grateful. I am going to send you pictures later to see what's available very easily and talk to you later, but I don't mean to like make it hard or difficult. I'm just an old hippie girl from the 70s, and you have taken away the labor intensity, Jesse, and made it more fun for people. And I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful.
Well, thank you, Deborah. That's wonderful to hear. I think I won't pause for too long here because I want to get us, we are very much in flow here, and I want to keep us in flow. But I think one thing I've been able to bring to this is a beginner's mind, because I am not, for anyone who's sitting here thinking, I love this concept and I want to do it, but I don't know how to build it and I'm not handy. Believe it or not, neither am I, not that much. I had kind of the right set of circumstances surround me at the time that the stars aligned to help BlueBarrel become a thing. And some of the pictures I'm about to show you, our customers have done amazing things. And our instructional materials are they're written by me, and they're for a beginner's mind. So if you're thinking, that, and the point here, we're not going to get the how-to. If you decide to go with BlueBarrel or any other kind of product, you're going to get the manual that comes with that. But it's wonderful to hear that you feel that this has become accessible, because accessibility, that's what I want. So anyway, back to the slideshow, scale and approach. So if you want to start small, there are plenty of single barrel solutions out there. I would just say I don't want to stop anyone. If you're motivated to do a rain barrel and want to start single, go on ahead, just get started. But the one on the left is a prefab solution. Some of them are designed with aesthetic designs, and then the one on the right is more of a DIY. Multi-barrel is what I have specialized in with BlueBarrel, and what's cool about that, unfortunately, we get the question all the time. The BlueBarrel system is a specific design, and the flow and the cleanliness of the water, it's a self-cleaning design, and it's also irrigation ready. You need at least 2 barrels. It's a multi-barrel design, so you can't redact that into all that function into a single barrel. But if you're willing to start with 2, you can then look at kind of much more storage for your site, whether you want to do a large tank, and that is an option for many people, or whether you want to do use smaller barrels to achieve the same kind of storage. So the picture in the middle is one I found on the internet, and you'll find lots of examples on the internet of how people have linked barrels together. And in this case, you'll notice they have a spigot on every barrel. And those barrels are probably linked with hoses kind of midway up or towards the top. So the water goes into the first barrel, and then once that barrel overflows, it overflows into the second barrel and then the third. So what's unique about the BlueBarrel system is that it's actually all plumbed underneath. So you only need 1 spigot on each system, although you can have more. And then you can have that whole system automatically draining through an irrigation system. So you don't need to manage. The one in the middle is going to be a much more hands-on. You're going to have to know which barrels are empty, which are full, and you're going to be moving hoses. The BlueBarrel system is really designed to function like one larger tank. So that's a multi-barrel approach. And then of course, I never discourage anyone from going bigger. If you're totally committed, BlueBarrel doesn't do this. I won't personally be able to help you if this is the route you go, but I would never discourage anyone from doing a large tank if you have the space and the budget for that, because more storage is always going to be a benefit. So it's the exact same concept. The anatomy of the system is very similar. It has the same key parts, just a bigger storage tank. Okay, so one thing I know, again, we have people joining us from all over. So here's just a rhetorical question: are some climates more suited to rainwater harvesting than others? So all of these pictures have been submitted by BlueBarrel customers. And I chose some really pretty ones. People paint the barrels. All these barrels started blue. And the reason for that is that we're using used barrels. I think we're the only company that sells a professionally designed system utilizing used barrels. We source them locally to every customer. We have 75 participating barrel suppliers all over the country. So when people order from BlueBarrel, they use our online planning tools to customize their setup. Then they get a voucher to pick up the barrels locally, and we ship the rest of the parts and the instructions from a central warehouse. So the woman on the left did a beautiful job in Alabama. That's the most Pottery Barn example I can show you. The guy in Colorado, do we have anyone here from Colorado by chance today? Okay. Anyway, Colorado, sometimes, just as an aside, sometimes people wonder about the legality of rainwater harvesting. There are so many nasty myths out there that it's illegal. It is not. Colorado is the only state that ever had state level widespread bans, and they've recently, in 2016, they allowed 2 barrels per household. So we sell a ton of 2 barrel systems in Colorado. I just wanted to make sure it's clear. This person obviously did more. There are exemptions to that. Some people can legally catch more even in Colorado. But that person also did a beautiful job. He elevated one system more and painted to match the house. The one in California is a very classic BlueBarrel design, someone who did not paint them, and they're just lined up in a side yard corridor. And then the person in Texas, he had his own tanks, but over time, our online store has evolved that we sell all the parts and pieces. So all that conduit material he got from BlueBarrel, and he used larger tanks. So in all of these climates, rainwater harvesting is a wonderful strategy to incorporate. A BlueBarrel system can be large or small. So we've already gone over this. The one on the left is our minimum 2-barrel starting setup. And if that's where you're starting, think about using it for houseplants. You don't even need to bother setting up an irrigation system for a system that small. Think watering can, houseplants, or veggie starts, things like that. The more sensitive the plants and the more confined the plants, the more they're going to benefit from that clean water. A 2-barrel system is not going to water your lawn. It's not going to water a large landscape, but you can certainly hand water until you run out, because your houseplants will be much healthier. The pots tend to accumulate all that mineral and salt and chemical that's in the hard water. I never knew I had a green thumb until I started rainwater harvesting. I could not keep a houseplant alive, but now I can. So lo and behold, the water makes a difference. The system on the right is the largest single BlueBarrel system that one of our customers have ever done. That's a single 42-barrel system. And she just had this very long corridor between 2 fences. And she's doubled the barrels up in certain places, as you can see. So that's it's 2,300 gallons of storage. BlueBarrel system can be any color. As I said, we have some beautiful examples of folks who have painted them to match their house. I did begin to say the food grade, you can find these barrels in white, but those are potentially not made of food grade plastic, and they're also not UV resistant. So if they're white, you have to paint them. I would always recommend just starting with blue, because you have a food safe plastic. And I say food safe not because you should be drinking this water. It's just as a show that it's a high quality plastic and it's UV resistant. Very important for maintenance to keep sunlight completely out of the barrels. And you notice too, someone at the beginning, I think it was Vanessa, asked some questions about maintenance. This is a closed system. These barrels are vented, but otherwise there's no mosquitoes getting in. There's no additional sediment getting in. Sediment gets filtered out on the way in. And the bottom draining design has the additional benefit of being self-cleaning. So this is not a system that you need to get in and scrub out annually. In fact, you don't ever need to do that. We do have a maintenance manual with what you do if you discover something in your water, but in general, the system is hosting a beneficial, it's a well-built maintenance-free design, and it's hosting a beneficial biology inside. So and it is that kind of light application of fertilizer that you think. So if something goes wrong, we have ways of dealing with it, but in general, you don't expect to have to scrub these out. The system can round corners, and it can be installed in double rows, so it's very flexible in terms of the footprint and the configuration you have to work with. This is 8 barrels installed on a 12-foot by 12-foot garden shed. It's collecting from only half of that rooftop, and it fills with less than 4 inches of rain. This is at a community garden in California. It can flex around obstacles. So here, this kind of farmhouse style home, they have some trees that they wanted to work around, some windows. So we give the footprint, the tight spacing for a system is 2 feet by 2 feet per barrel. But it's very flexible. You can stretch it out farther than that if you have things to work around. And you can see they have that pipe going underground. So this system is irrigating that very strip that it sits on. That's providing the water for those trees. And it can collect from many downspouts. So all of these systems, this is a single property. They did 27 barrels in total. The one you see on the right is a very classic single line on an existing concrete pathway. So they didn't have much to do on the foundation there. That's a really easy install. On the other side of the house, they have river rock. So they had to actually replace that. It needs to sit on a foundation that's going to pack solid. So if you have river rock or pea gravel, for example, those round substrates don't pack. You just dig that out, replace it with like a crushed road base. And this is more detail than you need for this format. We provide, of course, all this information. So on that shadier side of the house, they jogged to 2 sides, but they actually connected those underground because they get uneven amounts of runoff from the different downspouts. So they just wanted both systems to collect from both connected downspouts. So as long as all the barrels are level with each other, you can connect them underground, you can connect systems to each other, and all the water will level through the entire system. Oh, and lastly, on the left, you can see this person's downspout. He wanted to go over the fence. So he just built a very simple archway and he used 2-inch ABS pipe to replace his downspout. If you're going to do something like that, downspout material is pretty easy to work with if you're going to stay, and it's inexpensive if you're going to stay against the house. But if you're going to pipe water elsewhere, I do recommend going to that round material. It's easier to get the curves that you need and all the bends that you need. And it's also compatible with our downspout diverter solutions. And it can be customized to any site. So here's another beautiful Southern California example of someone who painted his system and followed a soft curve around his house. And you can see if you look closely, he did a large enough system that he's able to collect from 2 downspouts, one by the garage and one up closer to the front door. The one on the right is a very classic predicament where for whatever reason you can't put the barrels right next to your downspout. We have hose extension and just put up actually an article and a blog with lots of visuals on people who've done creative things to get the water to where they need it to be. And then here's someone else who did one under a deck. He had planned to do a double row of 5 for 10 total barrels and then found he had a tree root in the way. So it's really customizable. He just didn't install that, the 10th barrel. So it's a 9-barrel system, but you can see that you can kind of customize to whatever space you have. And then on the lower right, that's a house that I used to live in, but we put an extra spigot on because one of them faces the back door. So that's how in the winter, when we want to water the house plants, we just reach the bucket out, don't even have to go outside. So it's extremely customizable for where you put your outlets, how you configure the barrels, and more. So I'm going to stop there. This is my resource slide, and it does have that PermaDesign calculator link on it. It has some starting points for how to get to BlueBarrel. It has Brad Lancaster's materials. Brad Lancaster is great if you want to become a student of rainwater harvesting and start where I started. If you want to take the shortcut, just go to BlueBarrel. But Brad Lancaster is wonderful, wonderful material. And we didn't cover passive rainwater harvesting today, which is actually just landscape work where we started with showing how a classic built environment is designed to shed water off. Just think about building your landscape with infiltration basins and you're not storing the water at all. You're just inviting it into the ground. Brad Lancaster has a lot of good material on that. And then ARCSA is the American Rainwater Catchment Systems Association. They are the professional trade association for rainwater harvesting. So that's a good place to find professionals in your region, more resources on rainwater harvesting, or if you're interested in a professional accreditation yourself, they do have a professional accreditation program. So I'm going to open it up again. We don't have a lot of time. I put some more slides at the end if the questions lead us back to wanting to learn more about a place-based assessment, how much water is actually available. But I'd rather turn it back over to you guys and hear what we want to hear more about.
Jesse, while people think about questions, let me kick this off. With one of those systems, let's call it a 10-barrel system at your house. Is this accessible for anybody to do? And how much time do you think that takes to actually set up a system?
Yeah,
that?
good question. So a 10-barrel system would require just a 2-foot by 20-foot footprint. And I call a BlueBarrel system a beginner to intermediate DIY project. I mean, safely, I'll call it an intermediate project. But we found, I did a customer survey a number of years ago now, I should do a new one, but pretty uniformly, people said the project was easier than they thought. And again, BlueBarrel sort of came together through a whole bunch of circumstances that I never could have planned out. But in retrospect, I do think a lot of that comes from the fact that I was such a beginner myself. We have these instructional materials that are really written for beginners. We have a full how-to video series that's just me, unintimidating me, putting all these parts together for you and walking you along how to do it. So in terms of how much time to do a 10-barrel system, I would say it takes me about half an hour per barrel, all told. So maybe 5 hours to do that project. The one thing that can take more time, to the point where you might need a separate day for it, is getting your foundation ready. So if you don't have a flat concrete pathway that you're going to plunk everything down on, you're going to need to maybe clear some space, throw down some gravel base rock, compact that. But it's not, I mean, this is not a project that takes months or even weeks. For a lot of people, it's one day. It certainly can be done in a weekend.
Mark, do you want to go ahead with your hand raise?
Yeah, just a quick question, and maybe you can refer me to some of the resource materials, but just thinking about winter in northern climates, is there a special way that we need to care for the barrels during the freeze-thaw cycle?
Yeah, remind me where you are exactly.
Madison, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay, great. Yeah, so winterization, and we actually, even I use the search tool on BlueBarrel's website at this point, because some of these blogs are buried so deep down that, like, I search winter, whatever topic you want to search, gravity irrigation, winter. We have a blog on winterization steps, but the quick and easy of it is, in a climate like mine, Northern California, we get intermittent freezes in the winter. We do nothing. It's okay. The system can tolerate light freezes, intermittent freezes. If it's a colder climate where you use pipe insulation, typically on outdoor piping, you want to use pipe insulation. So the barrels themselves are 55 gallons. They're large enough. They're not going to hard freeze unless you live in the hard freeze type climate. So the general rule is follow typical outdoor plumbing protocols for your region. If outdoor plumbing gets in, you can just use pipe insulation on the bottom. If you do live in a place, say you, Mark, can ice skate on the local lake in the wintertime, you're going to drain them in the winter. And so you drain the system in the winter. There's a quick downspout disconnect thing, and there's actually a winter cover that's sold separately, but that restores your downspout. And then just as soon as that snow starts thawing, you can reconnect it to collect the snow melt, and you're using it in the spring, summer. And usually in those climates, you get the summer rains, right, where you can be irrigating during the summer, and you're not irrigating in the winter. So it all works out. In California, where we desperately need that water whenever we can get it, we don't really have to worry about the disconnect. Anyone else?
We did have some, Jonas in the chat says they would like to inquire about systems to keep washed off debris, et cetera, out of the barrels. So what do you do?
So actually, in 2013, California anyway, and I know a lot of states adopted code for rainwater harvesting, which I know people think code scary, but it was actually a huge blessing, because all these people walking around saying it's illegal so a lot of, some people did get wrist slaps for rainwater harvesting. It's just because regulators didn't know what to do with it. So what the code did was put in place kind of simple guidelines for how to build a system safely. The BlueBarrel system incorporates all of those. But even for a non-permitted system, so the code doesn't even say you need a permit. There are certain things that will trigger a permit. Tanks over 5,000 gallons in size trigger a permit. A system that's hooked up to permanent electrical triggers a permit. A potable system triggers a permit. But if you're just doing garden irrigation smaller than 5,000 gallons, not hooked up to any permanent electrical source, no permits required. But the code outlines the inlet filtration is one of the things. So the water has to pass through 16th inch mesh before it gets into the system. You really want a closed top. So I know there's lots of DIY designs out there and people think, oh, I'm going to use open top barrels because you need to get the water in. You're going to have algae, you're going to have mosquitoes, you're going to have growth, you're going to have maintenance issues. So I definitely recommend the closed designs. Which if you were to buy anything prefab, it's going to be a closed design, and the BlueBarrel system too, it's a closed design. So in terms of keeping the debris out, it's that 16th inch mesh that does the job. Excuse me for a minute, because I have a show and tell, so let me off screen for 2 seconds. So this product is called a leaf eater, and this one's all wrapped up, but it actually has a stainless steel mesh. And in BlueBarrel's video gallery, I have lots of show and tell on this product specifically. It's technically not required. Our regular downspout diverter comes with the inlet screening, but if you want a real robust, kind of easy to work with solution, you're going to want something like this. It's $50, very good investment. Will keep everything very easy to service. This top just pops right off. People instinctively want to install them way up by the downspout drop. I tell people install them at eye level because you can just dust off the leaves every time you walk by. So anyway, I hope that's a good answer in brief to the question about keeping debris out of the system.
I know that it's the top of the hour and we always talk about bonus time within the Latitude community. So I'll just make that note. But do you offer gift certificates for, like in the real estate community, we give gifts to our clients, and it would be really nice to maybe think about that. So that way, when a home closes, we can actually give gifts that help advance the regeneration of the property. And I feel like this would be such a good one.
Yeah, that would be something to discuss. We can develop gift certificates. I actually had them in our online store we did like a 2-year trial on it and sold. Do you want to know how many gift certificates? 0. So the option is not currently available, and it was, but if there were an interested partner who wanted to make that actually go somewhere, we certainly could.
Well, get some folks with a real estate license and people buying and selling houses, and that may actually work.
Interestingly, BlueBarrel in the end, we are most successful consumer direct. We also piloted an installer program. People do ask us if we install. I can't even get my head around all the reasons why, but it's never gone smoothly. Our ideal, and I admit, I think I watched Russ Chapin's presentation where he said, you don't want every customer. And that's true. The customers who are a good fit find us because they're the ones that are Googling for how do I do this? And they kind of want to DIY it. And then they find us and realize that it's all well designed, it's all put together, and they still get to build it themselves. We're usually not a fit for the person who wants someone to show up and have a full service professional involved in their lives. So I just throw that out there because some of the triangulation we've tried to do just hasn't been successful. It's if someone finds our website and feels in their heart that we are a fit, that's the magic.
That's kind of like regenerative real estate. Like the people who find regenerative real estate, they know in their body is like, oh my God, I have found my people. I'm activated. Let's do this. But not everybody's there.
Right.
We've got another comment. Courtney, I wanted to just acknowledge what you had said. Courtney had a question, wondering if there's a specific type of gutter that's best to use. I've heard that a screen over the gutter is not the best idea.
Yeah. So the gutter system really is just the conduit. So as long as your gutter's not leaking all over the place, and if your gutter works, it's going to get the barrels to where it needs to be. The actual connection happens in the downspout, which, quickly, the gutter is the horizontal member that's collecting water from the roof line, and then the downspout is the vertical piece that comes down and brings it to the ground. So this is, a classic downspout diverter. We have sizes to fit different sizes, but some people like to see this, like, how is that connection actually made? In terms of the leaf cover, so you might be talking about, there's one brand called Gutter Glove. That's, it's not cheap, but it's basically like a screen that goes over your whole gutter to keep leaves out of your gutter. You don't need that. Some people have found, I don't even know a lot about them, but I have heard that if you don't get up and clean those off over the years, they can get kind of plastered over to where with leaves, to the point where all the water is just sheeting over the top of the gutter. The mitigation for a rain barrel, the important mitigation is right here, that you have that screen, or in the case of a leaf feeder, I wish this were unwrapped, but this literally just, there's no tools you need. This just inserts right there. And that is, so the closer, in my rainwater harvesting training, the trainer used this visual that stuck with me, so I'll share it with you. If you try to trap the leaves further up the system, they're going to be in a place where you can't see them. They're going to accumulate, and you're going to be making tea. So think about that. You're going to be making tea up there. You're going to have a lot of tannins in the water that comes down, and plants don't like tannins. So you really want to let the leaves flush through the system as much as possible and shunt them off as close to the rainwater catchment system as possible. Let me see. Garrett, did you have a question?
Yeah, Mark had his hand up first, so I'll defer to Mark.
My quick comment is just that this video that we're making right now, I think would be a great gift for a great closing gift, because it explains it to the DIY community how easy it is, and we could invite them to watch it and then get their barrels. That's all.
Absolutely. And I'll offer too, for any of you who do visit BlueBarrel's video gallery, it's divided into different playlists focused on different areas of interest. But towards the bottom, we have one called Rainwater University. And that's me giving anywhere from half hour to hour and a half, but what we just did, but even in more depth. So anyone who wants, people learn in different ways. Some people can just navigate the tools on our website. But for anyone who wants to have the information kind of presented and digested and hear a Q&A, those videos also exist, and you are all more than welcome to them. All right, Garrett.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Sorry, I tuned in a little late, so I don't know if you already covered this, but I've heard you talk a lot about water catchment, but I'm wondering about the next part, which is actually getting it to the plants, and some best practices that you've come across in your time doing this work. And I say that having seen a pretty slick system where somebody had a pump attached to their rainwater catchment system, so they had pressurized water at the exact pressure that they needed for their drip irrigation or for their, their whatever watering system they have. So just briefing.
Yeah, that's a very apropos question. And even if we're nearing the end, it's a great question for the end, because in BlueBarrel's evolution, the first thing that got figured out was the storage system itself, the rainwater catchment system. And we started selling that online. And pretty quickly after that, the number one question we get is, well, now how do I irrigate? So, a couple of years in, over the years, BlueBarrel has developed a subspecialty in gravity-fed drip irrigation. So what that actually means is no pumps. And again, it works super well if you have a slope working in your favor. It even works fine if on a flat site. The only thing you can't do is get water to go uphill. With gravity, then you would need to use a pump. So in BlueBarrel's online store at this point, you can not only customize a rainwater catchment system, but you can also stock up with gravity-fed drip irrigation gear. And there's a little bit of a difference between a gravity-fed system and a pressurized system. I think in this format, the best I can do, since we don't have time for a detailed kind of how-to, although we do have all of that on our website, is some expectation setting. So what you can't do, because we get this question a lot, you can't mix pressurized and non-pressurized water sources. So some people think, well, I already have, you know, a main tide system. I'm going to put in the rain barrels and I'm going to pipe them all together and it's all just going to work. No, no, no. Okay. And you also can't mix potable and non-potable sources for safety reasons. But if you have your rainwater catchment system, the gravity fed system is very simple. It actually has fewer parts. You don't need a pressure reducer. Your pressure is already reduced. And you don't need a vacuum breaker because you're not going to be sucking water back into the mains. So it's a simpler system. Some of the parts, the main line tubing, like that 1/2-inch tubing and all the fittings are total commodities. Those are the same for any system. But then once you get into the actual emitter line that you're using, and the timers that you're using, and then the filters, everything we stock at BlueBarrelSystems.com is specifically designed to work together with gravity. So people really can use us as a one-stop shop at this point. I will just say within Blue Barrel, we don't have a lot of expertise on pumps, actually. We really have specialized in the gravity fed direction, but a lot of our customers have done pumps. And what I tell people, all the hookups are standard 3/4-inch garden hose. I use a little portable pump when I need to, only if I want to water something that's far away, and I just hook it up and plug it in. So if you're thinking of a pump solution, you're just going to need a Googleable words, a utility pump or a transfer pump. Anything beyond that, to be honest, I can't advise on anything that's hooked up to permanent electrical or anything like that. It's just not our specialty. We have specialized in gravity fed solutions. Anybody else?
And hey, if anybody wants to go for 43 barrels to make the world record here, please let us know. We would love to be interested in that.
So sorry, I have to up the ante. This spring we did have someone do 46. I don't have any pictures of that one. But
so high water's 47.
And I think he technically split them into 2 separate systems. So maybe the 42 barrel is still the largest single system. I don't know. So I love it when customers send photos, but most of the systems we have out there, I've never seen. I don't know. It's just wonderful to know that they are out there and functioning.
We could go global with this, Jesse. This could be the Blue Barrel Challenge hashtag, and see who wants to go past 47.
Yeah, and actually, you know, and I don't know how many of you actually are real estate professionals, but since that seems to be a theme within the group, do we have a minute for me to screen share one more time and I can show you a couple of maps? Because maps are fun, and I think people who think about properties and where we're all situated in the country like maps. So anyway, can you see my home screen?
Yes.
And okay, so really quickly, this is Blue Barrel's homepage. We try to make it welcoming and fun to invite people in. And for those who want to start planning, they can start simply here. Site the system, size the system, and then here's where you customize. But in terms of maps, and we can ship anywhere in the world, but for now, our barrel supplier network is US based. So each one of these recycling symbols represents a participating barrel supplier. My goal, I would love to have one every 50 miles across the entire United States, but you can see we have certain areas. This is where I live. Where pretty much anywhere you live, you can find someone in 20 miles. Some people are driving 100 miles or more to get their barrels. And then we do have big zones where we don't have anyone participating. That said, we have a barrel supplier request form. So if someone's browsing our site and doesn't get a return with our barrel search, they can ask us to help them find them barrels. And more often than not, my customer service team is able to do that. We find them on Craigslist. We try to recruit the barrel supplier with mixed degrees of success. They get paid. We pay them, of course, for the barrels. So I put that out there if you know anyone with stockpiles of 55-gallon drums. But in certain areas we're, really well stocked. I just took you out into the ocean there. The other map I wanted to show you, because this is cool. And here's, we have a whole bunch of customer submissions that we highlight on our website just to inspire people. But here's another map. So these are the sites that Blue Barrel has actually served. So we're close to 6,000 sites. And in some of the areas where we've done more business, and you can't zoom in close enough to see anyone's actual property, but we're just kind of creating a heat map here. So you can scroll it. So this person has 2 barrels, 6, 7 barrels, 12 barrels, 4 barrels, 29 barrels. So you can kind of look at your own neighborhood and see what's going on there. So I just love this because sometimes people need to know their neighbors are doing it, or you know, and even in these areas where we don't have barrel suppliers, we've managed, and we have a lot of people these days who just order gravity fed drip stuff from us at this point. Probably half our orders are just drip gear from people who've got their big tanks, they've got that all set up, and then they find us and realize that we sell, you know. And I think the reason that's valuable is because if you go to an irrigation store, they have everything, and then you need to have the expertise to know what goes with what. Everything we have works together and works with gravity. So that's become a bigger thing. But anyway, you can kind of see this map of what we've been able to do. These yellows and oranges and greens are actually clusters of systems. So in this area, we've got 171 sites in this part of Florida. And then you can keep clicking in to get the zoom in. So 2 barrels, 1 barrel, 1, 5, 2. So anyway.
Jesse, Jen Noto from Asheville, North Carolina says, are there delivery solutions with the suppliers, or is it pickup only?
Yeah, so while we're in here, some of our barrel suppliers do deliver. So I think it could probably be instructive if I show you how the online barrel search works. And Neil, I'm glad you front loaded me with the zip code for Portland because I need a zip code. So this is what our online store looks like. And you can choose the rain kit with barrels is our entire rainwater harvesting solution. You can also order the rain kit without barrels. Many people have their own. And then we have the add-on kit. So that's how, if you want to start small and get bigger later, that's how that works. But if you want to do a rain kit with barrels, first we're going to ask you how many systems you want. So you can customize up to 4 systems in one order. So let's do, well, I'm going to reduce this just for the sake of getting more barrel supplier returns. I'm going to do a small system, 2 barrels. And then here you get to tell us what dimension downspout you have. So that's how we send you the right diverter kit. So to find your barrel source, Neil gave me a Portland zip code. So I'm going to say 97214. And we're going to search. Okay, so we have someone in Gresham, which is nice and close. But I'm going to expand. We let you search up to 200 miles. So just to give you a sense. Oh my gosh. We have 4 Portland barrel suppliers. They must be out of barrels. I need to check on that. Because so what happens is once we sell them down, they stop showing up in the search. Let me use, but to answer the question at hand, delivery options. So the barrel suppliers are independent. BlueBarrel we don't have deliverers all over the place, but if they offer delivery services, we tell you right here what those are. So this person will deliver 15 to 20 miles. Minimum delivery quantity is 10 with a minimum fee of $100. So you don't pay for that at checkout with BlueBarrel. We're just giving you that information here so you can plan that out for yourself. And then once you get your barrel voucher, then you organize the delivery with the supplier. And here, these guys, what do they do? 20 miles, $20 within Eugene, $1 per mile outside of Eugene for delivery. Just for fun, I'll do my own zip code. We'll keep this at 200 miles. So depending where you are, you may get 1 return for barrel suppliers. You may have a whole list of choices. So you get to see how far they are from you, what was in the barrels. So selling used barrels, we're required to declare that up front so that the user knows what was in the barrels, what their pickup hours are, and then whether or not they offer delivery services. And as you can see, some do and some don't. So, and then from there, you hit continue and it lets you keep building your shopping cart with all the accessories that we looked at.
Well, Jesse, this is extremely impressive. I think, understanding how you put this business together is equally as impressive as the subject matter itself. I know that I got a lot out of this hour, and we're all very appreciative of your time and creating this for at least the country right now to be able to utilize. And I hope that there's going to be a lot of action that gets taken from this call. I know certainly we're interested in blue barrels and and definitely have a community that would love to support and get rain barrels themselves. For anybody that is just tuning in, you can go to Jesse's website, which is BlueBarrelSystems.com. And if anybody likes these kinds of themes, the regenerative real estate home environment, and you want to participate in these kinds of calls on a monthly basis that are free of charge, you can sign up on our newsletter at chooselatitude.com. And this is really the essence of what we're trying to do, is how do we bring in the spirit of transformation to go from conventional towards regenerative, and reconnecting the hydrological cycle, bringing water on site, really doing it in a way that is quite democratized, because I can tell you, it is not an easy thing to go find a contractor to site your system and to install rainwater harvesting on a house. It's kind of crazy how cumbersome that can be. I think this is fantastic, and we really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you all. It's been lovely spending the hour with you.